Hello friends and welcome back to MSFS Flight Plans. I'm Nick and I am very happy to report that we are finally getting back to one of the favorite locations we have ever toured on this channel. This is also the first flight we ever took on this channel, which is a real milestone for us. That was about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 18 months ago, which I think is the same thing. But you can't find it anymore because I deleted that flight. It was an awesome location, all kinds of cool information, which I'm going to greatly expand upon for this one. So if you're actually one of the very few people that was around at the very start of this channel and you saw that, I would watch this again. It's going to be an even better flight than that one. But I deleted all those early flights because the narration was so horrible. So now you'll get to hear only marginally better narration, and you'll get to see it in 2024. And in the last video I posted, which was a tutorial for how to fly this beautiful beast in front of us, this is the Archer Midnight. I said we're going to have to take this thing out to our super secret location because we are near Area 51. We're going to be checking out the Nevada test site, which is where the U.S. was testing all their big nukes back in the day. Lots and lots and lots of them. If you haven't been out here before, it just looks amazing. There's nothing else on Earth like this. There's bomb craters all over the place. So much history. Just really cool. Looks really good. So we're going to fly this thing out here. And you can see I have my charging card hooked up, and the reason why is because this one does not start with a full charge, despite me leaving all of my planes, at least for these flights, with the tanks full and permanently full, just so I don't have to mess with that while we're flying around. So I got it hooked up and charging, and it looks like it's pretty much done as it is. So while that's going on, let me just adjust a couple things here. Check this out. Yeah, that's a flight plan. It loaded up just fine, and the autopilot works just fine, which is just fantastic. Really cool. Another one to put on our short list of planes that are fully functional. So again, I'm not going to go through how all this stuff works. There's one thing I'll mention in just a second, which I've kind of figured out, or that I want to mention since that tutorial flight. But other than that, just go check that video out if you want to know how to fly this thing. And you definitely should, because this is really cool and a lot of fun. All right, let's look at the map real quick before we lift off. So some of you I know have been out here before because you mentioned that you were. There's our motors doing their startup procedure there, which is great. And I'm sure you've been to Vegas before. We're not too far from that. So here's Vegas right here. We're about 65 miles to the northwest. And we're going to start just south of the town of Mercury at Camp Desert Rock Airport right here. I think it's just called Desert Rock Airport. And then cruise up through the test ranges. Here's one, the smaller test range. This is Frenchman Flat. And then up here is where all the huge bomb craters are. And then we'll just come around there and land over here at HOLEY, a.k.a. Area 51. And hope we don't catch anyone's notice while we're up here. I think we'll be fine in this thing. Okay, so that's that. We're good to go. And what is all this stuff saying? That's parking brake on, parking brake off. That's set. I don't know why it's telling us we got... Oh, is the charger still plugged in? Let's unplug that. I wonder if you took off, it would just show that thing hanging down. That would be hilarious. I don't think it would, though. Might not let me take off. Okay, so that's all good. We'll go back. Good to go. Okay, so again, just real quick, these are your left-hand and right-hand inceptor. That one there is the left-hand inceptor. This one here is the right-hand inceptor. To get it going up in the air, just pull back on it, right-hand inceptor. And this is just mapped over how you would map a regular fixed-wing stick. Forward and backward would be your elevator, left and right would be your ailerons. But the thing I want to mention, because it still feels a little bit awkward for me, is while you're in hover mode, and only while you're in hover mode, to yaw, unlike the Joby, which is the other eVTOL aircraft, you can use your pedals to yaw. But with this one, the pedals, which I've got linked over to my left-hand inceptor. You can see it moves to the left when I give it left rudder. That's how you will just move directly to the side, and yawing is controlled by the one on the right. So the Joby, your pedals would yaw, which feels a lot more like your anti-torque pedals would in a helicopter. But this is only in hover mode. Once you go to regular flight mode, everything feels like it should. Rudder pedals feel like rudder pedals, left and right feels like ailerons, so you'll have to go through a few reps of that to kind of get used to the way that it feels. But you will figure it out eventually. It's kind of hard to land if you're used to landing helicopters because it's just kind of the opposite of everything. But once you go into forward flight mode, it feels totally normal and natural. And I'm also really still not using my throttle lever. I'm just using that button, that switch that you go forward and backwards with, just to go to the stop. So if I click it forward once, which I'm about to do, it'll take us to the first airspeed stop, which is 96 knots. And then if I click it again, it'll go to the top, which is 117. And then you just cycle back through it to come back into hover mode. I haven't really found an instance yet, unless I'm just trying to move really slowly where I need to mess with my throttle lever. So we'll click it forward one time, and then set the autopilot when we get to the end of the runway, and away we'll go. You can see the top of the airspeed tape there. It's saying 96. That's what it's going to target right now. And another thing that doesn't appear to be working, you can see our altimeter is saying we're at 3,000 feet. This runway is at 3,300 feet. And if I reset my barometer by hitting B, it'll drop down to like 500 feet. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it as we're going through this. And autopilot on, nav mode. We got ourselves a lock. Cool. Adjust our vertical speed. And that's how I'm going to fly this, just adjusting the vertical speed, since I don't really know what altitude to target. So we're leaving from November Victor 65 Desert Rock Airport, an uncontrolled private strip owned by the Department of Energy with an elevation, as I mentioned before, of around 3,300 feet. And the runway is about 7,500 feet. Man, it's a bit breezy out here. This is the live weather. Yeah, look at that. Look at our PFD there. What is that, 18, 20 knots? The airport's name, Desert Rock, is from a code name the military was using for some atmospheric nuclear tests they were doing out here in the early 1950s. And they even built a big pop-up base right here next to the airport back in 1951, which it looks like there's a bunch of buildings on there in the sim, but they're not there in real life. I'll show you at the end. They're just foundations left. In just a minute off to our left, we're going to see the closed town of Mercury. It was established in 1950 to house and service the staff that was working at the test sites. And they named the town after the mercury mines in the area, which were big business back in the 1800s, before everybody went plumb crazy from being exposed to that stuff. There it is over there. But today the site is also governed by the Department of Energy and is inaccessible to the public, which is why it's called a closed town. It's not a ghost town, but it is closed to the public. And in reading some accounts from guys who had worked or stayed out there, even up until the 1990s, they said they felt like it was a time capsule when they got there from the early 1960s, where all the staff was dressed up and acting like they just stepped through a time warp from 1962 or something, which is great. And apparently there was, and maybe still is, a notoriously good steakhouse on the premises. And even though they say it's closed and nobody really knows how many people are down there now, there used to be about 10,000 at its peak. But after the moratorium in 1992, they kind of shoved everybody off. But on the satellite map at the end, we'll check it out. Lots of cars down there and lots of freshly painted parking lots. So there's some people doing something down there. But a neat spot way out here in the middle of nowhere. And you can take tours of this place. I read that once a month you have to get on a bus at Las Vegas, and then they'll drive you out here, and you're very closely monitored as you're out here. But they said it's free to the public. They'll take you all around this area, the spots that they want you to see. There it is. You can even see some of the cars down there. Neat little place, Mercury. So we're going to follow this road called Short Pole Line to the north to check out our first test site, and along the way I'm going to see if we can make out a section of decaying old benches that were used for folks that were observing the blasts back in the day. And what's really wild about this is that these things are sitting right out here in the open air just 6 miles from the site where the nukes were detonated. So that open kind of light colored spot up there ahead of us, that's where they were letting them off. And just where these mountains end, right to the left side of the road, is where they had the viewing section. And it's going to be really tough to see these. They're hard to see even on the satellite map. But I'll show you generally where they were so you can have a sense of how close they were to these blasts. Short Pole Line, by the way, the name of this road, got that from an oversight by the Army when they were setting up the telephone lines out here for the poles. They only sent half as many as they needed, so they cut them all in half and installed them anyway. So the phone poles out here, if they're still up here, maybe you can still look at them. We're only 12 feet high. And they called it like it was. Okay, so just to the left of the road, let me see if we can spot these things. I don't think there's going to be a way to see. See that little rectangle up there? It looks like a rectangle. It looks like it's about a centimeter off to the left of the road. Yeah, you can't see them. It's just a tiny spot. They're right next to the road. So that's about where it would be. And again, I'll show you at the end what that looks like. And this area that we're coming up on is what everyone on the bleachers was here to enjoy. It's a roughly 6 square mile dried up lake bed called Frenchman Flat. And its original military function was a big landing strip, but then everyone realized that blowing up nukes was way cooler than landing planes. So in 1951, they made it the site of the first U.S. land-based test since the 1945 Trinity test over in New Mexico. They had one more before this one, all at Bikini Atoll, not the huge one, although there may be a video of it. It was a very small one that they did before they lit one off out here. But this was the first land-based one after the Los Alamos tests. And it was part of something called Operation Ranger, and they called that first one the Able Shot. And I'm going to include links to actual footage of all the tests that I'm going to mention on this trip, so you can check them out if you want to. That's assuming I can find footage. So if you don't see the link, I couldn't find it. But if you look around for footage of the Able test, which was the first one they did out here, you'll find plenty of them on YouTube. And I was going to post one of those, but as I looked around some more, it turns out that everything you'll see is likely from any of the 7 Buster Jangle tests, which were about the same yield, all of which were 30 kilotons or less. And it sounds like we know they are all misidentified because the Operation Ranger tests were at night, and so far no footage has been declassified. Which is kind of interesting because they released a lot of the others. And I'm going to take a look, even though it's going to be labeled under the Able Shot test, take a look at that, because you have got to see what a sub-30 kiloton blast looks like from the ground. Not very big, and mind you, that would have been twice the power of the Hiroshima bomb. In fact, when you see it, the first thought that came to my mind was, man, that Beirut port blast a couple years ago looked way bigger than that. Again, they were 6 miles away, but still, it looks surprisingly small to me. One other interesting test at old Frenchie was called Upshot Knothole Grable in 1953. And that one was the only one fired from a cannon that they called Atomic Annie. That's the name of the cannon, which is unbelievably awesome. And I'm sure I'll probably be able to find some footage of that one, because I have seen tons and tons of videos of them shooting one of those off from a cannon. So let's just say that link will be in the description. By the time the atomic dust settled, they conducted a total of 14 atmospheric tests out here at this spot between 1951 and 68, the largest of which was a 37 kilotonner that they called the Priscilla device, also awesome. And they also did 5 underground tests out here from 65 to 68. And if you want to see that cannon they shot that thing out of, Atomic Annie, for yourself, you can find her at the Fort Sill Artillery Museum in Lawton, Oklahoma. And I was looking at all kinds of maps for this area, trying to find out where they shot that from. I couldn't pin it down precisely, but it looks like it was just across the road from those bleachers back there. And they didn't have anyone sitting at the bleachers for that one. They set them off on the other side from where we are now by those mountains over there. Just in case there was a problem with that shot, although the poor guys running the cannon had to stand right there. And all these rectangular things you see on the ground out here, you'll see them as we come around a little bit more. I'm not sure if they coated this entire area or just those rectangular spots. It wasn't with cement, but it was like a mixture of packed sand and some kind of like loose adhesive material. And they did it for the whole area just to keep the radioactive dust down when they blew those things off. And they got all kinds of stuff just still sitting around down there on the ground. Some new looking stuff too. We'll check out when we're done. But it's just littered with rusting old relics from all that stuff. One of the more interesting artifacts that's still down there is an old bank vault before a 37 kiloton test, which might have been the Priscilla device in 1957. The founder of a vault company named Edwin Mosler convinced the government to let him set up one of his finest specimens right underneath the thing, both to boost his company's reputation and a symbolic gesture to demonstrate how the U.S. economy would weather a nuclear apocalypse. Because everybody knows the only thing you'd want when you're starving to death is cash and gold bars. But it sounds like it survived the blast just fine. You can see pictures of it online. They've since taken the door off of it, and the outsides of it look like it was hit by a nuclear bomb, but apparently everything inside was just as delicious as it was before the test. Especially if you like the taste of uranium. By the way, the time of day right now is set, when we took off, it was at 0 UTC time, and you'll want to set it around there, depending on the time of year, because you're going to want some shadows over these bomb craters. You really can't appreciate the depth of them without any shadows on them. You don't want the sun directly overhead, which will probably give us a nice view of the sun setting over those mountains as we're coming in. Somewhere out here, they also have a bunch of old pig pens where they would keep some swine that were destined to be volunteers for testing different types of clothing and fabric after being exposed to radiation. And they didn't kill them either. They just gave them some anesthesia and tied them up. They put some of them in these metal canisters with holes in them and dressed them up in different types of clothes and then checked out what the effects were on them. Poor guys. Wonder what they did with them afterwards. Probably didn't eat them. I couldn't find any designations for this big area up here on our left on any of the maps, that big open spot, but I did see a picture of it that looks an awful lot like that for a hazardous waste storage area that is supposedly somewhere out here in this section. All of this is called Area 5, by the way. And when we take a close-up look at the end, you'll even see a bunch of half-buried containers down there. We'll see if we can see them when we come by. You can see them really well on the satellite map. And it looks like, at first I thought they were containers that they were in the process of burying, like from the backs of trucks. They are containers, but not that big. When I got a close-up shot, they look like wooden boxes and a whole bunch of those 60-gallon metal drums. I don't know what they have in there. They say it's low radioactivity stuff. And they do have some areas out here where they bury really deep in the ground, like power plant waste and things like that, but I don't think it's at this one. Different part of the site. But this is really a great looking area. Of course, everything out here is default. I couldn't find any add-ons for this area. Looks really cool. Look at all these lines and stuff all over the place. And you know, because they get so little rain out here, that most of that stuff was probably for some kind of test and it's just left as it was. So I think on the left side of it there by those buildings is probably the newer section. Once this pillar gets out of the way, we'll see if we can see where they're covering that stuff. Alright, just coming into view are the open pits right now. And just on the right side of that first one there, you can see that faint little white line. That would be like the half-buried stuff. And that triangular shaped thing there is another pit where they're working on burying some stuff. Very cool. So now we're crossing into Area 6, and you can see that giant dried-up lake bed ahead of us. That is Yucca Flat up there. And this is where the bulk of the tests occurred out here. That big bowl over there to our right. Of course, we'll check all that out. And just south of these mountains, at the base of the flats, there's some structures that are part of the device assembly facility, which we can just see off in the distance over there. See off to the top left corner of our glare shield there? There's like a lighter spot in front of it, and then above that is where that facility is. And they didn't start using that till 1998, which seems peculiar since that was after the test ban, so I'm not sure what they're doing down there now. And I bet the military would like to keep it that way. And just over the top of these mountains, right on this side of the lake bed, there is an airstrip that is a real conundrum. You cannot select it in the sim or little nav map, despite there being a perfectly well-maintained, well-preserved strip down there and some hangars. And in the government publication I used for most of this research, which seemed to detail every square inch of this region, they didn't say a word about that place. You can see the buildings right there on the side of the lake bed. So I guess they're just hoping they don't draw attention to it. Maybe we won't notice. Of course, they'd be drastically underestimating the terrain watching capacity of OCD weirdos like me. See it down there to the right? Some suspect that that is being used for testing unmanned military aircraft. You can actually see some of the clamshell hangars down there too, and they got that big circular perimeter wall around it to keep all the looky-loos away. Look at that, look how nice it is. I don't know why they wouldn't let you select that. I mean, it's obviously a runway and obviously in perfect shape. I actually landed there to recharge my batteries on one of my test flights, and no one said anything, but why would they if you come in flying something like this? I measured the length of it, by the way. If you're taking a more traditional plane on your sightseeing tour, it's right around 5,000 feet. Right in front of us there on the left side of the lake bed is a dirt strip you can select in the sim, but it's really hard to see from the air because it blends in with the ground. You can kind of make it out with a sun lower like this. Not that it really matters since the whole area could probably work just fine. But that's called Yucca Airstrip and was completed in 1950. And you see that little pass in the mountains right ahead of us? On the far side of the road running through that is an area called the Control Point, which is the main firing center for all the tests. And that spot was selected because it had an equally good view of both the Frenchman Flat and this range up here. And on top of the hill, just coming into view behind our glare shield there, is a peak called the News Knob, which is where all the journalists would set up shop to film the blasts. And it was called the Knob because the original News Knob sign was painted on the door of a toilet with the knob still attached. And I know I don't have to tell anyone how awesome that is. And now we approach the main spectacle of this flight, the Yucca Flat test site, also known as the most irradiated, nuke-blasted spot on the face of the Earth. It was the location of 739 tests with 827 separate detonations up until the moratorium of the early 90s. And we're going to kind of zigzag across it. There's the control center right there. See it? On the other side of the road. We're going to cut back and forth across it so you can see all these massive craters as we check out a few specific spots that I found particularly interesting. And the first thing that we'll barely see are called the Apple II houses. We got a few minutes before we get there. But these were built anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 feet away from the blast epicenter as part of a series of tests called Operation Teapot in 1955 to see how various structures would withstand a nuclear detonation of 29 kilotons, which was twice the size of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And they filled the houses with furniture and food and even mannequins, probably just for the shock value, of which there's plenty on the video I'll attach. It's super creepy. I know I'll be able to find that one. I've seen tons of them. And as you'll see if you watch that, and I hope you do, most of the houses were completely obliterated, but incredibly, some of them stood up pretty dang well, as we're about to see up here. It's pretty amazing to think about that, considering how completely decimated Hiroshima and Nagasaki were, that anything could withstand those. So the ones that those houses were exposed to would have been twice the size of what happened out there in Japan. There's some of the craters over there to the right. See them? I'm also going to attach the document that was used, it was produced by the government, that I used for most of this research. Wikipedia was vastly wrong about pretty much everything, but the document is from the government, so maybe that's the one that's wrong. But check that out, it's really long, it's a PDF, but it details everything out here, and there's so much more than we're having time to talk about or that we could see from here. And I'm guessing pretty much everything in that is something that you'd be able to see on any of the tours if you came out here. Look at all those craters. Yeah, if you don't have the sun set a little bit, they just look like white spots on the ground. You really can't see the relief, so make sure you drop that sun some. One of my local sim buddies, after watching that video of the tutorial for this plane, said, why do you keep putting videos up that you know not many people are going to watch, because not many people seem to fly these types of planes? And I said something like, well, if I was concerned about number of viewers, I would have stopped a long time ago. But I'll tell you why I like flying these things, and I like them a lot. I am such a huge geek for all forms of aviation, particularly the unique things that just seem to defy our current understanding of technology. This thing and the Joby are just amazing. The stability features they built into these things, I mean, it's part drone, part computer, part helicopter, part plane, and it's so fly-by-wire. It's just amazing to fly something like this. I absolutely love it. I think it's fascinating. I mean, you get in a 172 or a Bonanza or even the bush planes and stuff. I mean, a plane's a plane. The cockpits look a little bit different. The flight dynamics might be a little bit different. But these things are a totally different ball game. The only thing I've gotten in the sim that I really didn't enjoy flying was the hot air balloon, because there's not much to do, which is why that video was so drab and boring. And then that blimp. I tried flying that thing. It's too much, and it moves too slow. It's very, very hard to control, and it would definitely fit my definition of unique and interesting, but I did not enjoy flying that very much. I tried it, thinking we might take it on a flight, but didn't do it. Just over the center of our glare shield there's the first of the houses. You can just barely see it peeking up in that little light spot right there. And then there will be a couple over to the right that we'll see as we're banking around as well. And I could not find out where exactly out here the blast was, but it was somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 feet away. And most of the tests they did out here, the vast majority of them were underground, which is what made all those craters. Those were not from things that they dropped onto the ground. Only a small number were atmospheric tests. I think about 100 of the 800 or so detonations were up in the sky. But the air blasts were far, far more destructive on the ground, because when you drop it on the ground and it blows up, the ground absorbs a lot of the energy. If they detonate it, there's another house right down on the right, see it? If they detonate them in the air, as is the plan for all of our current nuclear arsenal, it is far more destructive, with way, way lower yields too than having it hit the ground. Another interesting spot back there by the dried up lake bed, they've got a couple of photography towers that they built back in the day. And there's another house right there, see it? And those were used to take a really quick, I guess they didn't have high-speed cameras back then, so what they did is they attached a flash bulb to the tip of a bomb that they did drop on the ground, and the flash bulb would go off the second the thing hit the ground, and they would just look for that part of the exposure on the picture, and there they would have the moment of impact, which is pretty wild, 1950s technology. Our next landmark will be a tower called Ice Cap Ground Zero. It's a 152-foot tower that was used to lower a super-cooled device down a nearly 3-mile deep shaft for an underground detonation. And it was hard to find consistent info about that test, but it sounds like it was supposed to mimic the environment of an explosion out in space. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the test never happened because it was scheduled in the spring of 1993, which is after the testing ban went into effect. But the yield was rumored to be up to 150 kilotons, which would have been big enough to be felt 22 seconds later in Las Vegas. And that probably would have been the biggest one they ever had out here. I think the record right now is around 137 kilotons. And if you look at pictures of the site today, it looks like everyone just kind of set their tools and clipboards down and walked away. There's even a picture of a little sign hanging on the scaffolding that says, "No classified discussions in this building." And the only way you'll really be able to tell it's a tower, as we'll see in a second, is the shadow, because the Autogen building looks like a little cube. It's just about to come into view here. Alright, see that dark spot just above that crater right there? That's the shadow next to that building, laying on its side, the long building. That's the shadow from the tower, which if you can just barely see that white thing on the ground. It's totally flat, but that's the tower. And then you can see the shadow there, which is facing the wrong direction. I was reading they thought they might, if they ever lift the ban, they want to be able to just go right back in there and start where they left off. But I think you can tour it. There were lots and lots of pictures on the inside of that, and some people were talking about it that didn't sound like they worked for the government. But the reason they covered the outside of that thing with that white stuff is, well, they just had a big piece of scaffolding there, but they covered it to prohibit satellite surveillance, which they probably do with pretty much everything out here. Somewhere in this vicinity, probably a little bit over to our left, I couldn't pinpoint it exactly because it's not labeled on any of the maps, is an area where they conducted the Apple I tests. We saw the Apple II houses before. But for Apple I, that was a 14 kiloton device, about the same size as Hiroshima. Sorry to keep referencing that, but it's something we're all familiar with. And that was detonated from the top of a 500-foot tower on March 29th of 1955. And though the size of that explosion is fairly unremarkable, the 600 troops they stuffed into trenches just 10,000 feet away would probably say it was quite an experience. And I can't help but wonder how many of them suffered the effects of radiation exposure. Not just them, but everybody working out here. I was a bit surprised to see the government left that data out of their publication for some reason. And somewhere else over there, which you can see if you fly right over it, I'll show you where it is at the end, is something called the BEEF, B-E-E-F. That is an acronym for the Big Explosives Experimental Facility, which is a fairly new place they've got out there where they are blowing up really big bombs to test the durability of some bunkers. I'm just trying to see if we can see it from here. I don't think so. It's pretty far over there. So we're going to cross back to the west now and into Area 2 to see the location of something called the Calibration gun turret, which is still sitting down there, though we really can't make it out in the sim. Well, yes, it will. We'll be able to. It's got a little bit of reality and a little bit of autogen on it. I'll show you where it is. But it's definitely cool enough to fly over and mention anyway. This thing is a ship-mounted 8-inch cannon. Well, it was originally an 8-inch cannon, thought to be pulled from the USS Louisville heavy cruiser. It was set up as part of the Operation Plumb Bob series of tests, and it was never intended to be used as an actual cannon. Instead, they removed the old barrel and replaced it with a big long tube that was 45 inches in diameter that was aimed at the blast from about a mile away. And they stuffed all their sensors down into the bottom of it to protect them from all of the radiation. I guess the idea was that they could cut costs by not blowing up all their equipment each time they lit one of these things off. And they had a perfectly good turret lying around, so why not put it to good use, right? This area right here, I think we're going to need to come up a little bit. Yeah, we've got a little bit of an incline. Okay, so to try to find this thing, there's going to be two huge circles, and one of them is at the top of that green hill over there. And then there's another one right at the edge of this brown stuff right here, just to the left of that circle. You see that intersection of roads there? That's where the turret's going to be. Look at this scene. This looks gorgeous. Look at this. This is amazing. Looks so cool. And I don't know what they were doing. If you look at that circle on the map there, that big one up there, there's a whole bunch of little craters inside of it. And they said a lot of these things, after they would blow up the bombs underground, sometimes it would take weeks, days, or even months for the crater to collapse after all the sand and earth was liquefied underneath it. So they just draw a big ring around it like this and rope it off and say, future potential crater sites, stay away. Alright, so here's the first circle, and that line coming off the left side of it there. Behind our pillar now will be just to the... Well, let's see when we get over it, and then I'll give you an orientation. To the left of the turret. Yeah, we need to come up some here. And there's the turret, just came into view right there. So it's the closest structure to us, and if you look down in front of it, if you have a big screen, you can see the little barrel of the thing sticking out. You see it sticking out down there? That's it. And it kind of does look like a turret. That's what it looks like in real life. They didn't model the barrel thing sticking out. So you can see it there, that little white thing sticking out of the front of it. Over to what would be the right now. Amazing. So now we're coming up on the holiest of all these holes. It's called the Sedan Crater, and is now a registered National Historic Landmark. And it's the largest of all of these, with a diameter of 1,280 feet and a depth of 320 feet. It was created in 1962 by a 104 kiloton device buried 365 feet underground, and was also the most toxic of all these tests, exposing more than 13 million people to radioactive fallout from the dust cloud blown up into the air. The good news is that the half-life was pretty short, and the crater could be safely explored without protective gear just 7 months after the test. But, ironically, that explosion was part of something they called the Plowshare program, which was exploring using nukes for civilian construction projects. That's it, dead ahead of us. You know what, since they say it's safe, maybe we should go down there and check it out for ourselves. Let's do that. That'll be awesome. As a matter of fact, I also learned, speaking of exploring it, that the Apollo astronauts came out here to use this crater to practice moving around on the lunar surface. Which is even more reason why we should check this thing out while we're here. Alright, so I clicked it back one notch, so it's trying to target 96 now, but we're pitched down pretty hard, so once we flatten out, it'll slow down pretty good. As we get closer, I'll click it back one more time, and that will slow us down real quick to get us into hover mode. Let's see how this area looks from real close to the ground. See how shallow some of those craters are? And I just have no idea what the function of, I guess, the yield and the depth all kind of went into that. What kind of rocks were underground, what the subsurface structure was like. Because that one's really shallow right there to the right. We don't want to explore that one. We want the deep one. Really deep. I did turn the rocks and grass on out here just because it's kind of rocky and grassy, and there are not a lot of trees, so I figured that wouldn't mess up our performance. And I have everything else turned up really high, so you can go ahead and crank it up for this place with all these default buildings and not much else out here. Alright, let's see how close I can get to the edge of this. The problem is, once you're stopped, to get it going again is kind of a pain in the butt, so I'm going to try to line this up pretty well to get to that little dip in the rim right there. The only thing about the rocks is you can see they kind of pop into view as you get closer, even with the terrain level of detail. I think I have it set at 240 right now, and they're still popping a bit. Okay, so slowing down, and this thing's so big, I bet we're a lot farther. Once we get out and walk around, I bet it's going to be farther than it seems here. Let's see how close we get before it stops. That's still pretty far away. Alright, I'm going to try to creep forward just a little bit here. I'm messing with my throttle now, which doesn't seem to be getting us going anywhere. We'll just click it forward one notch. Put it back into flight mode for a second. Up we go. Oh, that's too fast. Alright, I'm just going to set it down. We're going to be out here all day, me trying to get closer to that. We'll just hop out and walk around. Look how great this terrain looks, though. Very, very nice. Particle effects, beautiful. Boy, this is rough. It is like the lunar surface. This is awesome. Look at all these rocks. Okay, let's hop out. Click over here. Can we get out? There we go. This is amazing. Look at this. This is so cool. If we were in 2020, this would all just be flat and blurry. This is amazing. I feel like we're on the lunar surface with plants. That wasn't too much of a hike. Look at these big rocks. Try not to step on anything. Stub my toe. Wow. Look at that. Oh, and we've got some floating rocks. I knew they were working on anti-gravity stuff out here. Let's go down in it. Where's this slide or roll button on this thing? Yeah, it does it no justice trying to check this out from the air. You got to get down and walk in it to appreciate just how massive this is. And I saw somewhere what the figure was for the amount of Earth displaced by this. And I know there's also a video for this one, so you can check out the link for that too. It's pretty impressive. Lots of dirt went into the air. I'll give you a little spoiler with that. This thing is massive! And what a great spot if you're an astronaut to test out driving around in craters. If it wasn't for the popping, this would be so unbelievably realistic. I don't even call the floating rocks realistic, because we are near Area 51 here. Look at that, guys. Look at that. Incredible. That is amazing. Man, I'm glad we hopped out. Alright, back up we go. Man, I might pass out trying to get back up this thing. Just think of what an amazing piece of history this is. Never mind from the Cold War era, but I mean, this was the start of the nuclear technology that powers so many, well, now foreign power plants. But just so much going on, and so many people used to be out here working. I would love to know just how many people they have and what they're doing out here today. Again, all the parking lots have fresh-looking cars in them. So they're working on something, and obviously at Area 51 they're very busy. All that stuff looks brand spanking new out there. What we can see of it. What's not buried in the mountain. Okay. Here we go. Now the question is, how far off track did I get from our plane? And we got some floating plants too. Oh my gosh, what a scene. Are you kidding me? This is unbelievable. Alright, where's the plane? Whoa, there it is. We're way off track. Alright, that's alright. It's a nice little hike. Guys, this feels really lifelike. This is cool. Really, really cool. Man, you almost don't want to get back in the plane. This would be a great spot to take the Juice Goose. If you've got it. And by the way, someone had mentioned that the Mamu Designs 2020 version, you know, I've been talking about looking forward to the Power Lines pack being available for 2024. The marinas and the cable cars are available, which I did install and does work. Someone said the 2021 will work, and I put it in, and I didn't mention it when we were flying by, but I noticed there are no power lines attached to the power line poles, so it is apparently not actually working yet. I'll let you know as soon as I find out it's working. That's one of my favorite add-ons. Okay, here we go. Shift that back to flight mode. And up we go. That was so awesome. I'm so glad we did that. That was really neat. I wonder what you could see if you went back to Frenchman Flat and looked around on the ground. They wouldn't have all the details of the stuff that's really down there. But man, if you look around down here, they've got all kinds of old tanks and cars that they were using for atmospheric tests, just littering all this area out here. It's really crazy. If you don't mind reading a little bit, and who likes reading these days, but check out that PDF I'm going to link, which is where I got all this information from. You can learn a lot of stuff about this area. So as we head over to our destination airport, which is the one at Area 51, I'll mention something for all of our aviation fans, which I'll go out on a limb and assume is everyone's still watching this flight. In 1952, they conducted a bunch of tests as part of Operation Tumbler Snapper, and man, you gotta love the names of all these operations out here, to see how 29 parked aircraft would withstand a nuclear attack. And 13 years later, they were deemed safe enough to sell for scrap, and one of them was a B-17 that sold for $269, and that's in 1960s money. I think it was like $2,600 equivalent these days, but they restored it and flew the thing out of here, and it was in rough shape. I saw a before and after picture. I can't believe they were able to restore it. But they flew it under the new name, the Yucca Lady. And that particular plane never saw any combat service because she rolled out too late in 1945 to get shipped overseas. So they used her for sea rescue support until she came out here to sit on bomber death row in 1952. But once it made it out of this place, she finally got to do some bombing, but instead of Nazis, she was extinguishing wildfires, and continued doing so for about 10 years, until she was bought by the Collings Foundation in 1986, which is an outfit that preserves and flies old warbirds. I'll also include a link to their website because they do some really cool stuff, and they have quite a few planes that are still flying around. And my dad sent me a link for another place, which for the life of me I cannot recall what it's called, but they have spots all over the world where you can pay what I thought were very reasonable prices to fly things like B-17s and all kinds of stuff. I think for $350, you could take a 2-hour ride in the cockpit of a B-17. It was somewhere out in the Midwest, but that would be an incredible trip. Really cool. And they had all kinds of other planes. I'll try to remember for our next flight to mention what that site is so you can check it out. Maybe you could treat yourself right. Take a trip out to one of those places. But once that foundation nabbed her, they converted her to a tribute plane, changing the name to the 909, which was I think the serial number for a plane that completed 140 combat missions without losing any of the crew. So they made a replica of that thing, and despite 2 pretty serious incidents, one in 1987 and another in 1995, she stayed airworthy until she crashed at Bradley International up in Connecticut in 2019, and that one completely destroyed the plane and, unfortunately, killed 7 of the 13 people on board. Which seems to happen in a lot of those things. I wonder how many B-17s are still flying. I bet it's not too many. So we're just going to follow this road here, which I think is probably the only road coming out here. I guess if you're coming to Area 51, you'd probably just fly right into their airport there, their strips. But if you're coming from Mercury, that would be a pretty good hike, but it would be very scenic driving through the test zone there. So right in front of us, you can see their huge salt flat called Groom Lake. And this place is also referred to sometimes by its official title of HOLEY Airport, or just Groom Lake, or Area 51. And sometimes they call it the ranch. I guess there was kind of a marketing ploy back when they first made it to try to convince guys to come out here to the middle of nowhere. They call it the Paradise Ranch, and it eventually got shortened to the ranch. And as all of you know, there is very little verifiable information about what's going on out here, but I can tell you a few things that are within the domain of public knowledge. It was acquired by the Air Force and the CIA in 1955 for the purpose of testing the Lockheed U-2 spy plane. And they have 2 extremely long runways. The one to the west is over 18,000 feet, and the eastern one is also a respectable 12,000 feet, both of which can be selected in the sim. And there's a pretty comprehensive history of everything that they've built and tested out here available on Wikipedia, but I'll save you the eye strain and just say that if the aircraft is painted black, it probably started life at this location. But in addition to domestic engineering, they seem to have a fairly extensive program for reverse engineering downed or captured foreign aircraft. And yes, by foreign I also mean aliens. But I was reading about a lot of Russian planes they tested out here, some of the MiGs and stuff, which they used to train the pilots over at the Top Gun school we saw about San Diego, which is no longer there. What a long, desolate road. Man, this is just what you want to see coming to Area 51. What a harbinger. I've seen some pictures of guys that got right up to the fence of this place trying to take telephoto lens pictures of what was going on out here, and I'm not sure where exactly that was. Probably not from this side of it because this is within the range, so probably over there in those mountains. But I read they recently expanded it quite a bit so that people couldn't get close enough to see anything. And I gotta tell you, we were at a soccer game the other night down by St. Augustine. They have a Northrop Grumman plant right down by St. Augustine, which is near where I live here in Jacksonville, where they do a lot of modifications of drones. And the past few nights, there have been some extremely low-flying aircraft, and we were at that soccer game, and something flew over that was a jet, and I could tell it was V-shaped because it had lights on it, and I could tell it was V-shaped, but it was really, really quiet and flying really, really slow for a jet. And I so wish, I have a little app on my phone, I'm sure you guys have it too, the Flight Radar 24 app. I pointed it up there at it, and it showed nothing. So I'm guessing that was something probably with the transponders and identification turned off that was flying into that airport, which I think is Southeast Regional, north of St. Augustine there. But it was cool, really cool. Alright, I don't really know where to put this thing down, so we'll just try to find an open spot. I'm not going to go all the way over there to the runway, and then once we set her down, be sure to stick around to check out Little Nav Map. And before we get down, real quick, for a couple more days, I will leave open the voting for our member-recommended flight plan competition. We got 4 flights loaded up. It's in the community tab of the YouTube page. Get in there and cast your vote. I also linked all the flight videos if you want to watch them again. The winner will get a $75 gift card to the sim vendor of their choice. And now we are in the next quarter, so any recommendations from here on out will be part of the next quarter. And you can get in there and suggest a flight using our Discord server, which I'll also link. Just go over to the left-hand side of the page on the Suggest a Flight section. And man, there has been a very big lull in sim activity. I've got a little app that shows how many people are using it on Steam. I just checked it a few minutes ago. It's like 1,800 people. So everyone using this on Steam right now, I think just until they get this whole thing sorted out, we're going to have a little bit of a drought. But not for me. I'll be here doing my thing, so if you guys want to hop in and find a cool place to go, check us out. Okay, I don't think we're going to go much further. I'm not going to do the whole creeping along thing again, so hey, this actually works out perfect. We'll put her down right here. Looks like a good spot to me. I can't believe there wasn't an add-on for Area 51. I feel like there used to be, but when I was looking at the flightsim.to map, I couldn't see anything anywhere out here. Someone's got to do this place up. Even if they put some alien bases and stuff out here, a few flying saucers, that would be amazing. Come on down, baby. Come on down. There we go. Ease her down. That's it. Okay, let's look at a little nav map. Let's get her shut down real quick. Alright, here we go. Blow it up. Take that off. Take that off. Okay, we got a lot of stuff to see out here. So here is what Camp Desert Rock looks like now. And in the sim, they put buildings on top of all of these concrete pads out here. But you can see the only thing that they have that still appears to be standing is whatever that is right by the parking area for the airport. And this thing, whatever that is. And it looks like they have a fairly fresh road going to that. Maybe that's where they keep plane parts or something. But look at this. All that stuff is gone now. And then here's the town of Mercury. And look at all these cars down here. Yeah, that doesn't look like a closed town to me. Look at this. They got a lot going on down there. But you can see, are these pads too? They used to have a lot more going on, you can tell, because those are all... And these kind of look like pop-up buildings, a lot of these. But they got a track for everyone so they can get their workouts while they're out here. What do we have over here? That's probably the dump. Probably dumping some more nuclear waste down there. Okay, so here's where the bleachers are. Yeah, there's no way we could have seen... This is the bleachers right here. The little square thing. That was impossible to see in the sim. So roughly the area... You can see these things, whatever these used to be. And then if you can try to make it out, maybe a different map, you could see a little bit better. That's where the bleachers would be. And then Atomic Annie was shot off from somewhere probably right around here. And again, it looked like everyone for that shot was sitting maybe somewhere over here. They have to be back pretty far. Let's just see how far from ground zero you'd have to be. So that's about... They were probably up in here because you wouldn't be able to see it behind those mountains. Maybe somewhere over here. I'm sure they were at least 6 miles away. So somewhere in that radius right there. But let's see if we can see anything down here. Maybe we can see the safe. I doubt it. The vault. Look at all this. You can see all the junk and stuff. So these things here, which I forgot to mention, these little domes, let's see if we can get a little bit closer. These were different bunkers that they were trying to test, and they made some of them out of concrete, which you can see survived very well, and then some of them out of aluminum. Why they tried that, I don't know, but if you look at the aluminum ones from the ground, they're just completely imploded. And they just left them all there, which is fantastic. Little lake down there, probably do some fishing, catch yourself some four-eyed fish. How awesome is that? Wow, look at this. They got a lot of stuff going on out here still. Someone's doing a little four-wheeling over there. Look at that. They got cars and trucks and everything parked down there. Yeah, they're not doing any tests out here anymore. And here's the waste disposal area. So, wow, you can really see it well here. Look at this. You can see all the half-buried containers. They're just pushing the dirt right over. You could kind of see this one. They were not as well defined in the sim, but you can definitely tell that's what they're doing out here now. And they're starting another pit over here. Pretty crazy. One of the pictures I saw, they had a bunch of what looked like wooden boxes. Really nothing. These kind of look like containers, but now that I'm thinking about it, the pictures I saw, they were just wooden boxes and like those 60-gallon drums of something. And of course, they had the radioactive badges all over them and everything. It was neat. Pretty cool. Okay, over here is the device assembly plant. This is the one that's fairly new. They started using that in 1998. And I'm not sure what this thing is, but that also looks really new, doesn't it? I couldn't find any information about that. And again, that was probably on purpose. But here's this strip that you can't select. And once it depixelates, you can see it is a very well-maintained strip. They got a nice big perimeter going around it. There's a little clamshell hanger. Pretty wild, huh? I just can't imagine why you wouldn't be able to select it in the sim. They just don't want anyone to know that it's there. That looks like a little bit of a bomb crater, doesn't it? I don't think they did any tests right here because this runway has been there since the very beginning and they probably wouldn't risk destroying their runway, which is obviously very difficult to maintain on a salt flat. Not really. Okay, and then over here we have the control point, and you can see from that spot, this is where they were doing all the firing of the weapons. You can see this area perfectly fine and this whole area perfectly fine. So that's a pretty good spot for it, and probably the only area in the region, unless you want to get up on top of one of these hills. And I forgot to put a tag on it, but this is where the news knob was, right up here, where all the photographers would go. Very cool. And next is the apple houses. All of them were pretty easy to see if you look for them. This first one that we saw is kind of in a big circular area. That one's really easy to see, but as you're making that bank, you can just look down here and see them all. Awesome. Look at all these craters. Wow. What an amazing area. Really amazing. Boy, that was a big one there. Look at that. Not very deep, but very large. I wonder if any of the airbursts left any kind of craters at all. Probably just kind of pushed everything out from underneath. Maybe something like that. This one here. And then here's Ice Cap, which you can see a lot better from here because you can tell it's actually a tower. There it is. Left just as it was, just in case I need to go back in there. And then here's the area where they were testing the very large explosives. And there's somewhere out here where they were also currently testing mine detection devices. And the picture I saw of it, it might be this thing here. It almost looked like a football field. They had a grid on it. They said it was very close to this thing. That might be what this is over here, which it also looks like they've had some recent activity yet. Got some fresh asphalt out there. Look at this stuff. Oh, God, what an awesome area. I would love to take a tour out here. And then here's the gun turret. Let's see just how close we can get. Boy, the resolution might have been better in the sim than we're going to get here. That's a little bit better. Okay, yeah, you can see it. There's the barrel, I guess, if you want to call that, sticking out of there. Wild. Really wild. Oh my gosh. Okay, finally we got the Sedan Crater, which was amazing. Let's see if we can see what that little black spot was coming down the side. I mean, surely they wouldn't put a walkway like halfway down it. That's interesting. And they got a little parking area. I bet you they let people go down in there. Very cool. And then we came over here to Area 51. Is that a checkpoint? Why is this taking so long to depixelate? Oh yeah, that's definitely a checkpoint. Look, you can see the little thing going across the road there. And that appears to be the only road going in or out, unless you take one of these dirt trails way up here. And then we came on in. Let's see if we can see any flying saucers or anything. I highly doubt it. Boy, you can't see any aircraft at all. Oh, and I can't take this off because we're parked at it. I think I saw two, they look like large passenger jets parked out here when I took this off, or if you look at the Google map, that's all I could see. They didn't have anything out where you could see it in the daytime anyway. But really, really cool trip, guys. I hope you'll take it, and I also hope that you'll take it in the midnight. That's a really cool plane. All right, until next time, we learned a lot of things and had an absolute blast. I cannot wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.